The following video, I'm going to be discussing things I'm against and for. This also should be started off, I have a bias. I'm against the usage in certain conditions of what we're going to talk about today. And I'll just list off the common names really quickly. Age of liability, responsibility, accountability, criminal responsibility, or apprehension, which is the actual mental faculty we're discussing, and a specific meaning for the word apprehension. Defense of infancy, or the infancy presumption, or minimum age of criminal responsibility, MACR, or mens rea. I think that's how it's pronounced. Common law, a child under a certain age can't be convicted of a crime, period, not a criminal action. And this is also taken further to convict the parent, or both parents, or the one who's most responsible for this. In the case of something that we would be discussing, if I wanted to go into it, it would be a specific mother who left a firearm 6 feet only above the floor in a closet, her closet, with a trigger lock that the child either defeated or they failed to put on correctly, depending on whether or not the parent wants to be honest and the police tell us what the hell's going on with all of their stupid rules. We won't know for a while. Common law, this is where it comes from. Under a certain age, the child is considered conclusively presumed to not have the ability for the mental state, for knowledge of wrongdoing, understanding what they're doing as an intention to commit a crime, as a component for a crime to be convicted of. A robot following orders can't be convicted of anything because it doesn't understand it's doing anything. In fact, I can build a robot that can do something that would be the equivalent to destroying your car, but you can't convict the robot of anything because it's literally may not even be aware a car is there. The action and conduct of the accused are only part of what constitutes a crime. I can rig up a firearm, put it in a vise, aim it at a target. Let's say I did a steel plate like an idiot. Fire it. And have the bullet bounce off the steel plate, go out through the door, and hit someone in the leg. I'm guilty of negligence at that point, but the criminal intent part is missing. All the actions are, I did a trick shot to shoot someone in the leg, but the intention was I'm trying to hit the target. I just did something profoundly stupid, which means I'm ridiculously liable because you don't shoot steel plate. Don't do that. Look up stuff. Anyway, let's move on. The conclusively presumed is after case after case after case of dealing with children and basically trying to find out whether or not they understood what they were doing. It was noted that under a specific age, and you're going to have to look up when these conclusions happen because it's been repeated throughout many centuries, that children are unable, in some cases, to understand consequences. Children between ages of 7 and 14 are also given the same presumption of being incapable of being a criminal. But a prosecution after a certain age, it may be 7 or 8 or whatever, but after a specific age, may be able to obtain a conviction if they can prove the child demonstrates this knowledge. They knew that they were doing something that would be wrong, or they knew what they were doing had consequences. And of course, again, someone can do something accidentally. Part of this was separating juveniles from the normal criminal system to heavily bias towards rehabilitation, treatment, and, social integration. Socialize them to where that they're no longer a threat or a problem. This goes from petty theft because I'm hungry, I need to eat, I saw food, I grabbed it, to defending themselves from being attacked and being jailed. Along with this comes a bunch of things like child labor laws and a bunch of other things. But some of this stuff is very, very old because people decided that if you observe raising a child, that they just don't get it. Can you really blame them for not getting it and it causes some horrible accident? U.S. federal criminal courts minimum age of responsibility is 11. not 6 or 7 or whatever. 28 states have no minimum age of any kind and don't permit that to be part of the argument. Others do. Most of them actually do. Depends on the locality. The rest of them, like Massachusetts at 12 and North Carolina at 6, have set some hard limit where they just won't allow prosecution unless it's for something that would result in life imprisonment and or the death penalty. Meaning you'd have to commit a capital crime to be treated or tried as an adult or tried even as a juvenile. Under Virginia law, children under 7 have the presumption of being unable to form intent to carry out an illegal act. Now the specific case, because it should be case-by-case basis. You should do this as a presumption and then have an appeal on purpose. Person's under a certain age, we are not going to convict him of a crime. We're going to do this as a finding of fact of what happened and then locate responsibility to the parent, guardian, or whatever. Obviously, the person with the trigger lock that didn't actually have a decent trigger lock would be responsible, except in a previous video I also explained trigger locks aren't required to work correctly at all. And there's a video of probably the same trigger lock being opened by a 6-year-old by putting in a bobby pin or other item and jamming in a screwdriver and wiggling it while turning it. And it took 3 seconds for a 6-year-old. Yes, granted, it's the kid of a locksmith or something, but it doesn't change the fact that a 6-year-old who's capable of planning, getting tools, and opening a lock on a frickin' firearm is demonstrating intent. And then signing off a piece of paperwork and handing it to a teacher saying, I hate you, I want to watch you die in fire, I want to light you on fire. And another occurrence of, threatening a kid while the gun was in his hands or in his bag, saying, I have a gun, don't tell anybody, I'll shoot you. All of these things literally force you to understand that this 6-year-old that shot somebody in Virginia or wherever had malice aforethought and had every other component, and this should not apply to them. There is no defense of this person being an infant and no infancy presumption or presumption of not having the ability to apprehend. Now we're going to bring up the developmental stages here and milestones. Here's my 12-ounce cup of water or coffee in this case. If I hand a 12-ounce cup and a 24-ounce cup to a kid, but they're the same height, depending on which mental bias they have, and yes, I've actually done developmental testing with a bunch of other people for college papers and shit. If the cups have the same height, a kid will take a larger diameter cup and pour it and assume that it won't overflow. You tell them to do it carefully, and they learn something, and they realize that that doesn't make sense. That's like having one of those magic weird cups you could buy, if you're old enough, from the back of a comic book. You could get some of these things that would do a magic trick where the cup would look empty after you poured water in it. You can get the same sort of effect out of a kid. They'll be like, how does that work? Its larger diameter allows it to hold more. Oh, okay. And then the other one is making a really tall, skinny, cup or container and a broad, wide one, and they notice that the height difference isn't more important. Some of them, it's the other way around. It's how big the diameter at the base is more important. So you give them the conundrum of seeing something that is unexpected. Unless they have the experience of seeing thousands of examples of this, a kid does not have the ability, nor do many of you, to understand volumetric changes or volumetric equivalency accurately enough to make it worthwhile, as evidenced by trying to explain to people what 12 gauge means. It's based on the volume of the material. If you double the diameter, if you double everything, X, Y, and Z, you octuple, or 8 times the volume. That is something that people can't understand who believe in Nephilim. If you make somebody 12 feet tall, they're going to weigh 8 times as much. I'm a 200-pounder, let's say. That's an 800-pound body, bare minimum. It's actually higher, which means the legs have to have dimensionally not double the diameter, but 8 times the surface area, which means you get the idea. This gets ridiculously, you get dumpy-looking, not troll-shaped things, but elephant legs on people. They don't look like you and me, all svelte and, pretty looking like I'm sure you are if you're watching. You end up with what looks like a mound of putty that's melted too much. But it's 12 feet tall, And by that point, because of the scale changes, your Nephilim monster doesn't look human. It looks like an elephant trying to sit on its butt. That's literally what happens. It doesn't look like what you think it does. That's also why Bigfoot can't be that shape either. Sorry. Because that's actually not going to work either. No, I'm not having the argument. Shut up. And a bunch of other things, like literally not understanding, volume bigger than size. Yeah. So if you shift from loading 410 and load your 12 gauge, it's not going to come out of the barrel. If you go the other way around, you're going to blow up the damn 410 shotgun. Seriously, these are grown-ups, right? Well, you have a diminished capacity to understand something because you have no experience. Now we get to kids who put a box on top of the staircase, cardboard box, push it down. Hey, it fell down. Then later, I pushed it down. Now, there's this sad moment a lot of parents have where they see their child realize that their consequences can hurt something, like a pet, or God help them, somebody they love. And they never forget it because they realize suddenly it connects in their head. My actions can not only have a reaction, it can have a disastrous reaction. And then they get very paranoid about it. One moment I had is I used to throw dirt clods at a wall. I was 7. I would throw dirt clods at the wall, and I knew that the dogs and cats would chase it. I didn't have a laser pointer. We didn't have the pet remote like we do now. And one time I hit a cat, and it hurt it. And I remember distinctly snapping from being a kid who did not understand consequences to being absolutely terrified I was going to hurt everybody and everything for weeks because I hurt a cat by accident. The cat didn't care 20 minutes later. It's just like, I'm getting treats and my head hurts. And then later on, I'm getting treats, my head don't hurt. Now I'm not getting treats. I'm going to go meow at him. And eventually I ended up with a parrot for a cat. It wouldn't get off my shoulder because it always assumed I had treats. And the dogs were very angry. They were jealous. But I became overly empathetic. Empathy is one of those components. The understanding that if you push not a cardboard box, but a wooden box down the staircase, you'll break it. I still remember these very shocking moments when I realized my actions have consequences. I destroyed my toy chest. I pushed it down the staircase. Well, you pushed it down the staircase. Well, I didn't mean to break it, but that's the effect. The consequences aren't based on what you think, feel, or intend. They're based on what actually happens. It's not what you intend to do, it's what happens. This is something that's an extreme, like literally running into a brick wall moment that I remember. Another one, I hurt somebody by accident. I used to discard things carelessly, ended up having something land on the staircase. I caused a relative to fall down a flight of stairs. I never forgot it. And again, I became very hyperconscious of everybody. It ruined me for ever being an asshole in certain ways. It also made me a complete jerk when other people were thoughtless. And then I stopped being that way about myself and everybody else, mostly. But the point is, those moments happen not from being taught in school or you showing them stuff in a video or watching a cartoon. They happen from really sad experiences. So let's assume some 6-year-old does not understand, most don't, that their actions have reactions at all. That's why you give them training. For millennia, children would learn how to be grown-ups because they were just treated like little grown-ups because everybody, all hands on deck, everybody's got to work to stay alive because we're starving in the middle of a desert. We don't do that anymore. So we extend the training period. That's why we have these different timings in different states. And that's what this is based on. Developmental capabilities and disabilities. The kid only behaves himself when his parents are around because only they can make him behave. And the child demonstrated a ridiculous amount of forethought here, including doing something that I would find challenging if I wasn't familiar with how shitty the lock was. That's the difference between these. So the intent test isn't tested, it's presumed. And the intent test should be. And in this case, the kid passed the intent test. This was malice aforethought and every other component. As far as we know. I don't know any more than you do. I only know what has been reported by the parent's lawyer. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. This has been a really crude example of me explaining something in the law. This is why you shouldn't ask me these questions, and I do appreciate it. Thanks for asking about the intent test.